This is the worst case I've ever seen as far as the facts go.
Telling O'Neill she had to fight to hold back tears during the trial.
For the rest of my life, I'll be haunted by what I saw as far as the evidence.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
When a judge who has been on the bench for 19 years, who has seen every kind of crime imaginable, looks a man in the eye and says his case is the worst she has ever encountered in her entire career, you need to stop what you are doing and pay attention. Because we are not here to talk about one man today. We are talking about three fathers who all looked at their own children and made a decision that no person with a clean conscience can begin to explain.
That first time you struck her with that hatchet, and little Ronnie testified that all he could see was tears coming out of his sister's face. At that moment, that child knew she was being betrayed in the cruelest, most tragic and sorrowful way.
Man, I murdered my children, a couple of my children, a couple months ago. They're in my garage, man.
One father stood in a Florida courtroom and admitted on the record that he killed the mother of his children and then turned around and attacked his own kids with a hatchet before setting the house on fire. Another one called 911 from North Carolina and calmly told the dispatcher he had been killing his children one by one for months, and their bodies were sitting in a car trunk in the garage.
It's non-emergent, but just have a confession. Man, I murdered my couple of my children a couple months ago. They're in my garage, man.
And a third man in Atlanta starved his 4-year-old daughter to behind a locked door while cameras watched her.
Don't accidentally starve a 4-year-old to death. It takes time. There's testimony that it took weeks to months to do this.
Monitors everywhere, outlets, exposed wiring.
What did it smell like?
Feces, mold, mildew, urine.
And shared a red flag conversation with the defendant.
This is how I have my kids trained. He pulled the door, pulled out a key, unlocked the door, and he snapped his finger and pointed to the floor and sat on the floor. So I said to him, I said, this is animalistic.
And then there was little Treasure.
Was Treasure able to speak?
No. She's like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's how she was talking.
By the time we are done today, you are going to understand not just what these men did, but who they were before it happened, and what warning signs were there that the people around them missed or ignored. Stay with me. Ronnie O'Neill III was born on July 27, 1988 and grew up in Riverview, just outside Tampa, Florida. Looking at parts of his early life, you can see somebody who wanted to be more than what he came from. He sang in church as a kid, played football in high school, and joined the ROTC military training program hoping to enlist. He tried to get into the Marines multiple times but kept failing the entrance exams, and that rejection pushed him into a long stretch of instability where he bounced between jobs, casino work, supermarket shelves, truck driving, nothing that ever stuck. What the public did not know until years later was that Ronnie had been carrying something dark since he was a small child. When he was just 5 years old, he was violated by people in his own extended family, and nobody ever addressed it or held anyone accountable, and he never received any help to deal with what happened to him. His biological father was absent his entire life and had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, meaning serious mental illness already ran in his family. After his arrest, a forensic psychologist diagnosed Ronnie with PTSD and delusional disorder, both connected to that untreated childhood trauma and to a near-fatal drive-by shooting he survived in late 2017 that landed him in emergency surgery. By 2010, he had gotten involved with a Tampa community group, mentoring young people, talking about God and peace. To the neighborhood, he looked like someone who had turned things around. But underneath that, the relationship with the mother of his children was quietly falling apart. Kenyatta Barron, who everyone called Kike, was 33 years old and had gone back to school at Hillsborough Community College while raising 2 kids on her own. Her son later said she was just a good mom, plain and simple. somebody who played football with him in the yard and made time for her kids every single day. Their daughter Ron Nevaeh was 9 years old with severe cerebral palsy and autism, nonverbal and wheelchair-bound, but full of spirit and recognized by her school teachers for her positive attitude. Kike and Ronnie had separated around 2016, but after he was shot in that drive-by in 2017 and had nobody to care for him, she let him move back in to recover even though her own mother had warned her not to do it. On March 18, 2018, just before midnight, Kenyatta called 911, and she was already shot. The recording of that call was played for the jury and captured her screaming for help, calling out to Jesus, and tearfully apologizing to Ronnie over and over again, saying she was sorry and that she loved him, trying to calm him down while she was bleeding. Ronnie had come at her with a 12-gauge shotgun, chased her to their daughter's closet, and fired into it at close range. Kike got outside despite being shot, but he followed her and beat her to death with the shotgun itself, swinging it so many times that the metal barrel bent from the force. By the time police arrived at 11:53 that night, she was already dead and the house was on fire. What Ronnie did to his children is what made the judge say she would be haunted for the rest of her life. He grabbed his young disabled daughter Ron Nevaeh, dragged her into the bedroom, and her in the head and back with a hatchet repeatedly.
Showed jurors a bent and broken shotgun they say was used by Ronnie O'Neal to first shoot and then beat Kenyatta Barron to death at their Riverview home. Jurors also watched a video today of the chaotic scene in March of 2018 as recorded by a neighbor. As first responders arrived, Barron's lifeless body was in front of a neighbor's home. The state contends after Ronnie O'Neal killed Kenyatta Barron, he then murdered his disabled daughter with an axe before stabbing his son.
His son testified that he watched his sister's eyes roll back and saw blood everywhere, and that she was crying because she could not speak or ask her father to stop.
Do something to your sister?
Yes, he hit her with an axe. And then he went in the garage, I followed him. He put me on the ground, and then he had his foot on top. I was laying my stomach in, his foot on top of me, and he was holding me down. And he was lighting a match.
Then Ronnie turned on his son, stabbing him multiple times in the chest, neck, face, arm, and stomach, then poured gasoline on the boy and lit a match. Little Ronnie made it out of that burning house with his intestines coming out of his body and burns covering more than 25% of him. And the first thing he told the first responders he saw was, "My dad killed my mom." When police reached Ronnie O'Neal that night, he came out of the garage smelling strongly of gasoline, with blood all over his hands and clothes, calling his own children the devil's kids and saying Kenyatta had been the devil. He was tased when he resisted arrest and kept ranting from the back of the police car. His son was airlifted to Tampa General in critical condition and was not expected to survive, but he did, and doctors described his recovery as a miracle. The case went to trial in June 2021 and became one of the most unusual murder trials in Florida history because Ronnie fired his lawyers and decided to represent himself, which led to him shouting at the jury and cross-examining his own 11-year-old son, who was testifying remotely from a safe location.
And how did I hurt you?
He stabbed me.
In his closing argument, he admitted killing Kike, but told the jury it was self-defense.
Because I want you to know the actual facts. I did kill Kenyatta Barron.
The jury convicted him on all 7 counts in under 4.5 hours, covering 2 first-degree murders, attempted murder, arson, and 2 counts of child abuse. At sentencing, Judge Michelle Cisco said what she had been holding in since the trial began.
This is the worst case I've ever seen as far as the facts go.
Telling O'Neal she had to fight to hold back tears during the trial.
For the rest of my life, I'll be haunted by what I saw as far as the evidence.
Ronnie O'Neal received 3 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole, plus 90 more years, and stood in court to say he had no regrets about any of it.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
It's the same reactions he's always had in life. It's the same reaction that caused him to commit these murders. You guys just got to see it for yourself.
So when you sit in that cell for the rest of your life, remember, you don't leave out until you're in a box. So when you sit in that cell every day, 24 hours a day, that scream, I want you to hear it. When she comes to you in your dreams, I want you to receive it. You know why? Because that was a child of God.
Done, a man would do, a coward would do.
Kenyatta Barron's mother told the court she was not pleased with the jury's decision.
I'm not pleased with what the verdict was, and I wish you could overturn it and give him what he's rightfully due.
As for his surviving son, the detective who first responded to the scene that night, Mike Blair, ended up adopting the boy in November 2019. The kid changed his last name to Blair and has said his new family tells him every day that he is safe, he is loved, and he belongs.
Mike Blair visited Ronnie as he recovered.
He kind of held onto my hand and as I left, and he said, "Could you watch a movie with me?" We were planning to go on a date night that night, and I said, "Hey, instead of doing date night, do you mind if we go watch a movie with this kid?"
I had already known that I would want to take Ronnie home with us starting that night.
Now Ronnie has a new family and 5 new siblings who've accepted Ronnie into their lives.
One of the best moms and dads. They take care of me.
It's become more than just a new house for Ronnie. It's a home. They even have a family mantra.
As it goes to the family, and it's, "I am safe, I am loved, and I'm part of this family."
Wellington Delano Dickens III was a veteran of the Iraq War and a widower raising 5 children alone in Zebulon, a quiet town outside Raleigh, North Carolina. When you first hear the basic facts of his situation, the loss of his wife, the pressure of being a single parent, a history of mental health struggles after military service, you might feel some sympathy starting to form. But the more you learn about how this man had been operating for years before the murders happened, the more that sympathy disappears entirely. His great-uncle told reporters that Wellington had never been the same after coming back from military service, that something in him broke and never healed, and Wellington himself referenced PTSD in legal filings over the years, though no treatment records were ever made public. His wife Stephanie was a deeply religious woman who died at home in April 2024 from complications of a miscarriage while 3 months pregnant. She had been bleeding severely through the night, but refused to allow Wellington to call for medical help because of her spiritual beliefs, and by morning she had collapsed. Wellington found her, tried CPR, could not bring her back, and laid her body back in bed and stayed with her for hours before calling 911. The autopsy confirmed natural causes. After that day, Wellington was alone with those children, and the neighbors in their development reached out and organized a food drive to help the family. He took the food and then disappeared behind his front door, and nobody ever saw those children playing outside again. The warning signs around this man had been visible for years before any of this happened. In 2015, he was charged with misdemeanor child abuse in Raleigh, though that case was dismissed. The following year, when his daughter Zoe was born with jaundice and needed medical treatment, he and Stephanie refused all routine care for the baby and blocked child welfare workers from entering the home, citing their religious beliefs. He was arrested for contempt of court after ignoring a judge's order to let doctors examine the baby, and he later sued the hospital and the county separately. In one of those lawsuits, he claimed the government had forced him to associate himself with the mark of the beast because a document he was required to sign contained the number 666. Both suits were thrown out, but they made clear this was a man with a deep distrust of any outside authority trying to get close to his family. And critically, he was homeschooling his children without ever registering them with the state, which meant no teacher, no school official, no government agency was checking in on what was actually happening in that house. Between May and September 2025, Wellington killed 4 of his children one by one inside that home. 6-year-old Leah died first in May after excessive physical punishment. 9-year-old Zoe was killed in August after Wellington taped her mouth shut as discipline. 10-year-old Wellington Vi, called DJ, died from being denied food. And 18-year-old stepson Sean Brasfield, who had cerebral palsy and was blind in one eye, also died from starvation and neglect in September. All 4 bodies were sealed in the trunk of a Honda Civic in the garage. Wellington repainted the walls of the house using special stain-covering paint he ordered on Amazon, and investigators later found he had been using a dating app and inviting people into the home, while those bodies were decomposing in the garage, just a few feet away. He had also buried a fifth child, an infant son, in the woods behind the house after the baby died earlier, without ever reporting the death to anyone. That body was never recovered.
From these newly unsealed search warrants, where investigators say that Wellington Dickens III told authorities a 1-month-old child died shortly after the family moved here to the home in 2023 and allegedly buried that child right here.
On October 27, 2025, Wellington picked up the phone and called 911, sounding almost relaxed. During that call, he described starting with what he called over-disciplining, admitted he had been using drugs including crystal meth throughout the entire period, and said over and over again that it was all his fault and nobody made him do it.
Non-emergent, but just have a confession. Man, I murdered my children, a couple of my children, a couple months ago. They're in my garage, man.
When deputies arrived, they found the bodies of all 4 children wrapped and sealed in the car trunk exactly as Wellington had described, and found his 3-year-old son alive inside the house. Wellington was arrested, denied bond, and transferred to Central Prison in Raleigh. Prosecutors charged him with 4 counts of first-degree murder and announced they are seeking the death penalty.
You have been charged with first-degree murder, which is a Class A felony. It carries a maximum sentence of life without parole or the death penalty.
Judge Jason Coates presiding over today's first appearance, in which Dickens said nothing other than to confirm his U.S. citizenship and asked for a public defender.
I will appoint the Capitol Defender's Office to represent you, okay?
The county sheriff said something at the press conference that landed with everyone who heard it. As of mid-2026, the case had still not gone to trial, and Wellington Dickens III remained in custody, waiting on a courtroom that will eventually have to reckon with the fact that he called 911 himself and said everything out loud. Rodney McWay was 33 years old when his trial started in Fulton County, Georgia, in June 2025. He was a single father of 3, and if you only looked at the surface, you might frame his story as somebody who was struggling, somebody who was overwhelmed and did not have enough support. That framing is wrong. What the prosecution showed over 2 weeks of testimony was not a picture of a man who needed help. It was a picture of a man who had deliberately and systematically turned his home into a place of suffering for his own children and rejected every single offer of assistance that came his way because maintaining control over those children was worth more to him than their well-being. DFCS, which is Georgia's child welfare agency, had already been involved with his family before things reached their worst point. In June 2023, investigators visited his duplex in southwest Atlanta after receiving a tip and found 3 young children locked in separate rooms, with no consistent access to food, water, or a bathroom in a home covered with mold, feces, and exposed electrical wiring. The children were removed and placed with their mother, who immediately took them to Maryland. But according to testimony, even before this removal happened, neighbors and family had been trying to help McWee, and he refused every one of them. The prosecutor later told the court that people in the community did exactly what a community is supposed to do, and he turned them away every time.
This defendant had resources. He had people in the community doing what we want our community to do, to reach out and help, and he just wouldn't take it.
1 month after those kids were placed safely in Maryland, McWee traveled there, took all 3 children back to Atlanta, and brought them right back to that same duplex. He had no legal right to take them. That was a kidnapping, and that is exactly how he was charged. Once he had those children back under his roof, McWee kept them locked in separate rooms and monitored through cameras positioned throughout the house, including cameras pointing directly at the children's beds. They could not come out without his permission. They were denied food, water, and bathroom access as forms of control and punishment. When DFCS investigator Ashia Hawkins managed to get inside during a welfare check,
Refuses to really fix things. I was told if you go out and tell the landlord about it, I have not done anything about it.
McWay snapped his fingers, pointed at the floor, and his children sat down immediately in complete silence. He looked at her and said, "This is how I have my kids trained." She described the scene in court as animalistic and testified that after leaving that visit, she was genuinely afraid those children were going to die.
Monitors everywhere. outlets, exposed wiring.
What did it smell like?
Feces, mold, mildew, urine.
And shared a red flag conversation with the defendant.
This is how I have my kids trained. He pulled the door, pulled out a key, unlocked the door, and he snapped his finger and pointed to the floor and sat on the floor. So I said to him, I said, this is animalistic.
And then there was little Treasure.
Was Treasure able to speak?
No. She's like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's how she was talking. But for me, the children were gonna die.
Why did you think that?
They weren't being fed.
Her fear turned out to be right. On December 11, 2023, police were called to the home and found 4-year-old Treasure McQuay unresponsive. She was rushed to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, where she was pronounced dead. The medical examiner testified she died of cardiac arrest, caused by months of malnutrition and dehydration, and that when she was found, she weighed 24 pounds, which, for a 4-year-old, means her body had been breaking down for a very long time. The doctor explained to the jury that when the body is starving, it breaks down organ by organ to survive, and the heart is always the last thing to go.
Don't accidentally starve a 4-year-old to death. It takes time. There's testimony that it took weeks to months to do this.
Her 2 brothers were hospitalized as well, and one of them ate so fast when hospital staff gave him food that they had to slow him down before he made himself sick from it. The trial lasted about 2 weeks and the defense did not call a single witness. Prosecutors brought in the DFCS investigator, the pediatrician who showed the jury Treasure's declining growth chart, the medical examiner who explained what starvation does to a small child's body over months, and body cam footage from welfare checks showing McQuay calm at the door while his children were locked behind him. Before trial, he had been offered a deal of 75 years. He turned it down.
Swaying in his chair, Rodney McQuay learns his fate.
Guilty of felony murder.
Guilty on all counts, more than a dozen of them.
Guilty of cruelty to children.
And with that, Rodney McQuay is cuffed and headed to jail to await a decision on his prison sentence. He is facing a max of 4 life sentences plus 112 years in prison.
The jury convicted him on all 14 counts in under 4 hours, and Judge Belinda Edwards sentenced Rodney McQuay to life in prison plus 155 years. He showed almost no reaction when the verdict came in. What the prosecutor wanted the world to understand after this case was that the system had multiple chances to save Treasure McQuay and kept getting blocked by a man who had set things up specifically to prevent anyone from reaching those children. Police, DFCs, and the community came to that house, and a 4-year-old girl still died of starvation behind a locked door with a camera pointed at her bed because the person holding the key to that door cared more about control than he did about her life. 3 different men and completely different methods. But when you put all 3 stories side by side, the same thing runs through every single one of them, and that thing is control. Ronnie O'Neal used rage and violence to destroy his entire family in a single night. Wellington Dickens used punishment and neglect over months, hiding everything behind homeschooling and isolation until 4 children were dead and sealed in a car trunk. And Rodney McQuay turned hunger and locked doors and cameras into instruments of domination, treating his own children like things he owned rather than people he was supposed to protect. Research on cases where fathers kill their own children shows that the most common pattern is not one single explosive moment, but a slow build of abuse and neglect over time. And the biggest warning signs are a history of domestic violence, prior contact with child welfare that went unresolved, mental illness that was never properly treated, and the deliberate isolation of the family from any outside community that could intervene. Every one of those warning signs was present in at least 2 out of these 3 cases, and in most of them, somebody in a position of authority already knew something was wrong. Treasure McQuay weighed 24 pounds when she died, and she was 4 years old. Ron Nevaeh O'Neal could not speak and could not beg her father to stop, and she was 9. The first of Wellington Dickens' children to die was only 6 years old. These were real children, and they were let down by the one person in the world who should have been their greatest protection, and let down by systems that were supposed to catch situations like theirs before they became the worst thing imaginable. If something feels wrong around a child in your life, a kid who has gone quiet, a family that pulled away from everyone, a home that seems too still, say something. Because in every one of these stories, somebody had a feeling before the worst thing happened, and nobody acted on it in time. Have you heard of a similar case? Let me know in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.